Good afternoon. Welcome to another Select Technology webinar. My name is Nick Ellis. I'm the Digital Transformation Consultant here at Select. We are talking today about data privacy with friend Phil from ID Solves, and also with Russell, our Solutions Architect here at Select. Phil, do you want to introduce yourself, give us a view of who you are, what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, hello everyone. Thanks, Nick, for having me. It's great to be online with you all. Just a very quick introduction. ID, we're a specialist consultancy that focuses on privacy protection for organizations and individuals. We've worked with a number of organizations all over the world, primarily in aviation, healthcare, that kind of thing. It's busy, you know, it's still an ongoing issue. It's a regulatory requirement. As people are becoming more aware of their privacy rights. So really, we're there to offer some guidance and support, consultancy, frameworks pointing people in the right direction, training, information, education on compliance with especially EU GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation.
Okay, thank you very much. And Russ, for completeness, I imagine a number of people who register with this already know you, but for completeness, would you like to outline who you are?
Yeah, hello there. I'm Russell Gower-Leech. I'm one of the solutions architects at Select Technology. So I'm very much kind of the technology evangelist. You know, my role for the business is to help develop technology solutions to meet business objectives. I develop services for Select Technology and for our customers. I'm a bit of a privacy advocate and kind of a tinfoil hat wearer in terms of privacy and kind of security. So yeah, any kind of technological specific bits and pieces is kind of what I'm here to help with.
Thank you very much for that. Can I start us off with a deliberately controversial and misleading question? So data privacy. First, privacy or privacy? I'm not quite sure. Anyway,
your choice. So
I'm going to go with privacy. Data privacy. Why is data privacy still a thing? And did we not solve this with GDPR to start with?
Well, data privacy is still important, Nick, on many levels. I've already alluded to the fact that it is a regulatory, it's a legal requirement. But, you know, if people just think, I mean, just what we're doing right now, you know, we're teleconferencing, online conferencing. Just think about the amount of information we share every day, every second, every hour, and not just in a business context. But, you know, as individuals, information about our families, ourselves, our children, whatever it might be, we're sharing this information through smartphones, laptops, PCs, whatever it might be. So that's why privacy is really important and will continue to be important. And in fact, that as people become more aware of their fundamental rights under privacy protection, this momentum will continue. Now, Europe, led by the UK, I have to say, Europe pioneered the European Data Protection Regulation. It is shaping global regulation as far as data privacy is concerned, and really at its heart of GDPR is the fundamental protection of rights of the data subject. In other words, yes, you know, I'm willing to share my personal information, but I need guarantees. I need to understand that that information will be protected. I understand what I'm signing up for. I know what information you'll be using, how it will be using, how will it be shared. If it's to be sent overseas, what guarantees do I have there? So all of these protections are enshrined around the fundamental concept, and I mentioned it in my article this morning, that here in Europe and in the UK, it is assumed, it is accepted that that is the property of the individual, of the data subject, right? So you have a fundamental right for that data to be managed responsibly, okay? it's not difficult. It's a lot of it is common sense, and so that's why GDPR has been so fundamental. Personally, I would go even further than that. I think with retrospect, privacy practitioners are now beginning to understand that really GDPR wasn't just about regulations and laws. It's almost a sort of a proto-constitution. It's the first layer, a constitutional arrangement that a contract, if you will, between the individual person and the data platforms or the companies, commercial, government, or otherwise, that access that information and how it's shared. So that's why GDPR hasn't gone away. It won't go away. It will become more complex. It will become more. There will be more regulatory requirements. And I know a few years ago when it was introduced, there was a bit of a rush. Companies try to introduce responsible companies introduce measures, et cetera, But the whole privacy issue, and we've seen it right recently with the tracing apps and things like that, it is still there. It's still very important, and companies need to be aware of that.
And indeed governments.
Yeah.
So what do we really mean? Because I mean, you sort of touched a little bit there on that it's still there. It's still, and you talked a little bit about understanding. What do we really mean when we say data privacy?
Sure.
Whose data, and what privacy can we reasonably expect? I mean, privacy strikes me in some ways as a quite a modern concept, and for much of humanity, the idea of privacy was pretty much lost on all of us. What can we reasonably expect now, and how can we as individuals, I guess, go about preserving and protecting that privacy?
Okay, so when I talk about personal information, it's any information that either on its own or can be chained together that will identify you. Okay, so that could be anything from your name, your usual stuff, right? Your name, your address, your telephone number, your email address. But then when we look at more sophisticated technologies, it also includes your behaviors, how the data is processed, your health information, facial recognition, things like that. Again, I come back to the point that it's almost like a mindset change, right? Where we operate today in society, our economies, national economies, government. We operate today with all of these amazing digital platforms, and they have transformed life, and they've been a fantastic, amazing transformation. But it's a bit like the social contract, yeah. There is a new contract emerging where individuals are saying, look, yeah, I'm happy to use all of this information that identifies who I am, helps you improve your product or services and analyze, but we need to have certain protections and safeguards in place. So that's why privacy is so important. And what can people do? Well, people can become, one, more informed, take an interest in it, actually read what the kind of statements, privacy statements that they're presented when they accept apps on their phone and things like that. Now, I know that's a tall order because some of them are, so complex, which they shouldn't be. They should be in very simple, clear language, according to GDPR. But take an interest, be focused on where is this app coming from? What information is it taking from my smartphone or my computer? Where will it be shared? What will happen to it? How long will it be retained for? Are my rights guaranteed? Are they protected within this application? Where will this data go? What will happen to it? And all of these things are really, really important as we become more immersed in this kind of digital landscape of the information services society, as it's called. Yeah, and this is especially true what's called special category data, right? Especially if it comes to your health information, for example. simple things like, if you're wearing a fit watch or whatever it might be, heart rate, blood pressure, all those kinds of things. Okay. What's happening to that information? Is it simply being used for the purpose that they said it would be used? Is it being resold? What's happening to it? So you need to be clear about these things, and this is especially true for the protection of children. And there's special provisions for the protection of children within GDPR, because this not only affects me as an individual, it also affects family, it affects children, it affects friends.
That's a very good point, and actually it's one that is often overlooked, particularly in business, except where the businesses are consciously targeting children. You've reminded me, and I've just quickly looked up, it was 10 years ago that GameStation had in their terms and conditions ownership of the subject's immortal soul.
Yeah.
Which they buried deep in their terms and conditions. And if you actively opted out of that, you got a £5 gift voucher for demonstrating that you'd read the terms and conditions, basically. Russell, I know you have unfold the tinfoil hat that you referred to earlier. I know you have some quite strong opinions on this as well. And we were talking, was it last week or the week before, we were talking on here about things like student data and what have you?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. We did a talk about the dark web as a general kind of concept and outlay for people, but it was more about the kind of the value of data, and that's just touching on something that Philip mentioned there. People knowing what they're signing up to, and you hit the nail on the head. The terms and conditions are so obscure, and they're written in such a deliberately obstructive legal language that no one really knows what they're signing up to. It's like the thing when you hit a web page that says, "We use cookies to improve your experience. Click here." Everyone clicks here. No one actually goes through and looks at the individual bits and pieces that's been collected. And let's not to demonize it, because obviously this technology is there for a reason. It's there for convenience. Cookies will help identify the type of browser or the device you're using, so you get a better experience. If you're using your mobile phone, the website will detect the fact you're using a mobile phone and a browser, and it will give you the phone-friendly experience that all fits neatly on the screen. If you're using a PC, it'll give you the normal kind of web content. It'll also help you keep track of the fact that you're logged in. So if you log into Amazon or wherever, close a tab by mistake or want to go back to your shopping cart, it's all still there. But there are other uses of this data where it is fingerprinting your activity and your device, and it's getting a picture of your habits. What are you interested in? What are you shopping for? So that the advertising can be a bit more targeted, a bit more specific. So I completely agree. People should take more of an interest, and unfortunately, I think it is by and large made deliberately obstructive, so people lose interest when they try and look. There's a few sites I've been to where you click on the cookie option and it outlines it quite neatly with marketing data, preferences. There's little tick boxes for each section, and it's quite clear which bits you have to get the experience out of the site and which bits you can opt out of, and that's great. But a lot of companies won't do that. Similarly for apps. And again, you hit an interesting point there, Philip, where if you're getting an app that's some sort of mobile game, let's say, why on earth would it need access to your camera? Why does it need access to your text messages and things like that? And it's quite common. These permissions are there to enable either future functionality or simply to collect information to help better get feedback and telemetry on the types of devices and the usage. And if you think about it in those terms, it does feel a little bit Big Brother, but it's not how it's kind of intended, I don't think. And one thing actually I'm interested in your opinion, Philip, is do you think there's a demographic kind of challenge with privacy? You mentioned obviously people need to be more aware of their privacy, and the internet's not been around that long, but there are a whole generation of people who've grown up with it, and they've grown up with this concept that they can broadcast their opinions and their daily lives. They can send photos and bits and pieces to quite a wide audience, and it becomes the norm. They don't think twice about sharing information. So do you think there's a challenge where they don't understand the consequence or the value of the information they're sharing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Russell. Yeah, it's accepted, it's a norm. Maybe people, younger generation would look and go, he's old and boring, he's trying to restrict our freedom, but we're really not. I mean, it comes down to just being careful. Look, let's be clear about this. The business economy has been absolutely transformed by digital technology. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's fantastic. More of it. But let's use a bit of common sense. Let's be responsible about it, especially now when we're so reliant on it. And it's something, and I know there's some organizations, the Cybersecurity Center, people like that are being very active in going into schools here in the UK and warning children, showing them, what they need to look for, what they need to expect. Parents should also be careful about that, about what their children are using, and be careful themselves, because the fraudsters, they become so sophisticated now using social engineering techniques. They know that people just automatically hit the OK button or hit install button. They don't think about what they're doing, so it's just really. It's part of our work. Really, is just keeping that awareness level up. Right. So, when we go into companies, we kind of do an assessment on the organization. We get what I call a feel for where the organization is as far as a data privacy culture is concerned. Now, I got to pay tribute to the ICO here, the Information Commissioner's Office in London. They have been one of the leading lights in Europe on this, providing exceptionally good guidance and advice on data privacy. They've been great to work with. And again, that's helped so much, because when we go into an organization and we're looking at the look and feel and the attitudes towards data privacy, that gives us a pretty good idea of whether a data privacy culture, as we call it, is there, or whether they see it as a barrier, right? Or why do we need to do this regulation? We don't need this additional regulatory control.
The productivity tax.
Yeah. But ultimately it protects the organization, it protects the executives, it protects the company, and it protects their customers. So it's keeping that awareness high. I'm a little bit worried at the moment, because the question that Nick asked, well, we had GDPR, did not deal with it, and it's kind of like, well, that's that problem sorted, let's move on to the next one. Now, I know a lot of executives at the moment, they've other things on their table, right? With the pandemic, et cetera. But this is so important now. It really is married very closely to data security, cybersecurity, privacy. They're very close, and they need to keep a watchful eye, keep the awareness high in organizations, keep the awareness high in the individual from the moment a customer contacts that organization, and how that personal information is captured, managed, stored, protected, retained, destroyed. It's absolutely critical, in my opinion. Yeah.
Do you find actually when you go into these organisations, I think one of the things you mentioned before is that you kind of empower them, you to use this, I'm sure it was it Comic Relief, teach a man to fish kind of thing. You teach them about what information is kind of valuable to them and why it's important. Do you find that there is a bit of an assumption beforehand that this is actually the responsibility of the DPO, or it's a responsibility of IT? It's not everyone's responsibility.
That's a really, really good question. Yeah, so oftentimes, an executive sees data, okay, that's IT department, boom, it goes over to the poor IT manager who has to try. Data privacy, and I would argue data security as well, is not just the domain of the IT department. It embraces every dimension of that organization, right? From the executive right down. As I said earlier, it's a cultural change. It's a change in mindset, right? Now, I'm going to push ID here a little bit, but we're kind of different. Some companies will go, okay, I'll engage this legal firm, or I'll engage this, they will take responsibility for it, they'll manage, tick the box, done. We don't work like that. Our belief is that the strongest position a company can be is to be have its own internal resource. So in a sense, we make ourselves redundant over time, right? My greatest pleasure is after a period of whatever it takes, that organization that we've been working for does not need our services anymore, right? So we transfer this knowledge to them, because if you go on the internet, this is one of the problems we have, is everybody becomes an expert on privacy, right? They go and read such a blog or whatever. That's fair enough, we all do it. But what we do is we come in and we give them not just the nuts and bolts, as it were, of the regulation, but the deeper side of it. It's kind of the old iceberg theory. If you can imagine, 1/3 of the iceberg is the regulation, and then beneath that you've got 2/3 of really what's going on in the organization. So what we do is we pass that experience on to them. How do you implement GDPR correctly? Have what you have introduced adequate? Can you demonstrate compliance, not just once a year, but on an ongoing basis, day to day in your operations? Okay. How aware is your staff about the importance of privacy and how it's managed? Because what we find is many of the problems actually don't come from IT or hacking or anything like that. The weakest thing is sitting in front of a screen, right? That's you and me. So it's important to keep that level of awareness up, and to pass that information experience, so that they're not only aware of the intricacies of data privacy regulation, but how to implement it, right? And once it's implemented, how to manage it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
And do you think some of that is a kind of a transferable thing? It's people need to be aware in their own lives about their own kind of privacy and security, and it will naturally transfer into the workplace, and vice versa. Once you've been in and shared that message, that experience, people naturally take it away into their own lives and feel a bit more kind of secure about it.
Yeah, well, that's what we do. That's the first thing I do if I'm teaching this. The first thing I say is, okay, look, this will not only protect your company and your country, your nation, because it is about data security, right? But it will also, your knowledge of this will protect you, your family, and your friends. You'll become much more aware of the issues around privacy regulation, and not just for GDPR, but in other countries, and how this movement is building. But I want to pull it back a bit and just say, look, no one is saying, no, you can't have a tracer app, no, you can't have this, or you can't do. It's just it's a question of reassuring the consumer that you, as a responsible company, why, as a responsible company, right, a legitimate responsible company, why would you not want to have the best standards as far as data security or data privacy are concerned? That's a no-brainer, because when you have that in place, the customer trusts you, you're better protected as an organization, so it all makes sense, right?
It's an interesting point actually you raise about the trust, because it's very hard to accrue trust. It's very easy to lose it. Yeah. And again, back to one of the points you made earlier about people kind of assume their data is treated in the way that they would treat it personally. Again, if they've not looked into the terms and conditions and looked under the hood, it's an assumption, and it is just an assumption. They don't actually know that's how their data is being treated. And yeah, it's an interesting point about things like the track and trace app. It's there for a good reason. It was there to help with the pandemic in a public service, but the government has demonstrated they haven't shown all the due care and attention, and that is very damaging to that trust relationship with the general public.
Well, that's an interesting comment. So I would pose the question: Can you trust the individual or all individuals to be sufficiently confident to be aware of that and to be to check that? I don't know. I suspect that many of us would, but some won't. And that there you see then the importance of government and the importance of regulatory control coming into play to protect everyone. I've mentioned the ICO, which I think has been, as I said earlier, a leading light. But myself personally, and I mentioned it in my article this morning, that I personally would love to see an inspectorate developed, a data privacy inspectorate. Now, my argument for this is that if I board an aircraft, right, to fly to some sunny spot for my halls, which is deeply, which would be nice right now, I was locked down. But I take a seat in the aircraft. I know it's safe, right? In the back of I know it's safe. Why? Because an authority, Civil Aviation Authority, Federal Aviation Authority, has approved that aircraft and the crew, the flight crews. Okay, so that gives me a lot of confidence. And I don't see that right now in the digital world, and I'm a little bit. I don't understand why it's not there. If you think about how much we rely on digital platforms, networks, software, that kind of thing, and yet we have the ICO, which is good, but I would like to see the ICO's powers extended and given more resources, or a new inspectorate created, so that if you're opening a huge, data center, whatever it might be, it is inspected, certified, and approved safe for flight, if you want to put it that way, so that people can have trust. Now, I know you mentioned this before. On the Russell, in the run up to before the broadcast. Okay, so we've got ISO, we have Cyber Essentials, we have all those wonderful programs, and they're very good, right? But I think that we need something more than that today, as we become so reliant on these kind of platforms. And it's interesting that the cyber chiefs, the platform bosses are all being questioned at the moment over in the US. Is in the news at the moment. But it's, are they becoming too powerful? Well, if they're becoming too powerful, and my view is, well, where would we have been without them during this pandemic, for email, conference calls, whatever, online shopping. So, it's been a huge asset to have those organizations. But I think also that government needs to step up to the plate and stop guidance and then stop. Guidance still continues, obviously, but firm up how these platforms are regulated. And I think a model like the Federal Aviation Authority, CAA, something like that, would certainly go a long way to give consumer confidence, public confidence in the use of these systems, and I think that's something that should be, given serious consideration in the months ahead. You mentioned the tracing app. I think that was part of the problem, is that the way it was communicated what was happening. So rather than self-certification programs like US Privacy Shield, which is now being invalidated, other types of self-certify, I honestly don't think the industry will self-regulate to this extent. But given the importance of these platforms, an inspectorate, an official inspectorate that will understand what's going on and be able to sign off on it, I think is possibly a good way to go. I know everyone won't agree with me, but that's certainly what I would like to see.
No, I can see the value, and I can kind of agree with it. It's interesting you make the point that, to a degree, big tech, there's a risk that they're kind of pushing an agenda and influencing change, and they already are. Yep. In some respects. You've got the Apple and I think it's Mozilla pushing the things with SSL certificates. So it's like tech nerdy thing for people. When you hit a website that is taking in data and needs to do it securely, you get a little padlock in the top left-hand corner, or a little green bar, depending on what browser you've got. That sort of standard has been around for a number of years, but it's grown in popularity as everyone's using it. And there's a belief in certain tech companies that certificates can be bought for too long. You can buy a certificate for 3 years, 5 years, whatever. And I think Apple have come out and said any certificate older than a year, they're going to highlight it as a security warning in their browser. I think Mozilla said the same thing. And similarly, I think Firefox are pushing secure DNS queries. And I don't want to get into the technical weeds of that necessarily, but yeah, they already are influencing change by the sheer volume of their customer base. You know, they've got everybody's ear. As you say, we're so dependent on this stuff. So it's interesting that, yeah, the government needs to kind of, as you say, step up to the plate and collaborate with them to have a consistent message and a consistent way of ensuring everyone's rights are observed. But I wonder if part of the problem is going to be the getting people involved, getting tech people who are, you know, innovative and creative, interested into that regulatory sphere and getting to work for the government. I think the governments globally have a bit of a bad rap when it comes to their tech savviness and also their trustability in some respects. I mean, you look at, we mentioned it, we did a thing about the dark web a few weeks ago. Nick mentioned there are some countries where freedom of speech isn't a thing, freedom of information isn't a thing. We've got the kind of Great Firewall of China, and people don't have the right to go out and get information. So, and you've got, I think the United States is quite gross and unjustified mass surveillance from several years ago that Edward Snowden publicised. I think they've set themselves a very bad precedent to even be entertained, to be trusted, to have that collaboration and that oversight. So it's interesting that I agree we need to have something, but where the government fits and how they reaccrue that trust to get that in place would be quite interesting to watch. Some interesting times ahead.
Yeah, so, you know, let's look at it. Right, you know, we rely on these platforms for almost everything, right? We rely on it for our shopping, our business, our social life, holidays. The list is endless. We rely on it on trade, and government confuses me. You know, there's some dimensions of government that are really visionary and far ahead. And then there's some elements that are just, wow, like there's way back there, you know. And the ICO, great start. It's doing you know, compared to what others are doing, I think the ICO, as I said earlier, deserves a lot of credit. But absolutely, I'm kind of flabbergasted, to be honest with you, that we're so reliant on these networks and platforms that there's nothing like this in place, and it's kind of left to self-regulation, guidance. You know, yes, you've got the fines under GDPR and things like that, but really, I think consumers, people, users are looking for something more, a stronger reassurance that you know, this particular data farm in Birmingham or Manchester, it has been thoroughly inspected and approved, just as you would if you were building a home, right, or building a house or something like that. And I think the government needs to run to catch up here a little bit, to bring that level of expertise into the industry. Now, attracting, as you say, the tech savvy people into this. Well, my goodness, you know, look at CAA, Civil Aviation Authority, FAA. I mean, it has some of the world's top pilots involved with it because they see the importance of it, the relevance of it. They're engaged in it. They're very proud of it. Well, that could be the same. Why can't that be the same for, you know, a digital regulatory authority? You know, clearly everyone who's involved in it, you know, the people I know involved in the ICO are very dedicated to it. But you know, that I think that level of expertise, that talent, will come once an inspectorate or the ICO is given the ability to be an inspectorate, you know, a proper inspectorate, and approve the, you know, data centers and how data is moved and personal information is managed, etc.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Oh, go on, Nick.
I've just realised I'm on mute. Apologies. I have a question, if I may. Because we've talked a lot here about regulation and obligation and requirements and commitments and good behaviours. If I can just be the voice of the small business owner,
okay,
which is probably a bit cheeky of me. why? You sort of briefly touched on it, Phil, but at the small business level, and I guess, I mean, at the community and the national level as well, what is the benefit to me? Because it sounds like a lot of regulation, a lot of hard work with little kind of kickback benefit for business owners.
Yeah, so trust, customer trust, really. I would say, you know, under Europe's privacy regulations, you know, small businesses, it still applies to small businesses. There are some relaxation over record keeping under 250 employees and things like that. We've worked with a number of small businesses about this, you know, on privacy. And the thing is that once they understand the importance of privacy, not just for their business, but for themselves, they actually become, you know, quite enthusiastic about it. And they're quite proud to say, you know, we've got these measures in place, unlike, you know, other businesses that may not. You know, we recognize the importance of your personal information, that if you know, you sign into the pub, you know, it's not a free email list. It will only be used for certain purposes. So it's really about confidence and business. The thing about privacy is that you know, people question the relevance of it until something bad happens, right? Until there is a breach of the data, or someone's data is misused, or there's someone's claims that their rights have been infringed, and then all of a sudden it becomes a problem. Yeah. So it's kind of like, let's do the, you know, the sensible, responsible, some might say boring stuff on a regular basis. Get that in place in the company, in the business, so that people are aware of it. That this whole culture thing that I'm talking about again, and hopefully, you know, that will prevent these kind of problems from emerging. But I certainly, personally, I think that people are becoming more aware of their privacy rights, and this is referred to in the law, that governments, large organizations, you know, they have to take into account the expectations of data subjects, right? So if I'm expecting, so for example, if I download a reputable app or whatever, after a time, I think most people now are familiar with the cookie policies that pop up, the privacy policies and things like that, okay? So I'm kind of expecting that. And then when I go to another business and it's not there, then, you know, I begin to ask questions, I become nervous, right? So, so it's managing customer expectations, building on your existing customer trust, because when you have a breach or something occurs, that disappears very quickly. Now, there are certain provisions within GDPR where you should respond to a breach, etc., within a certain time limit. But the reality of it is you may not have those hours or days. You know, with social media today, the frenzy that follows, your reputation is tarnished very, very quickly. So that needs to be managed especially well. And if you have been responsible, and if you've done everything reasonable, you know, everything reasonable, right, as a responsible company, that puts you in a much stronger position than if you haven't.
I would argue it's not that much work either in some respects. Once you've actually got the foundation in place and people are practicing and being aware and you know, kind of good hygiene and good consciousness of privacy in the data they're handling and respect of that data, I would argue it's not that much hard work to maintain that. Would you agree, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it can be if it's from a standing start and you're trying to assess where the it can be a little bit of work at the beginning, but you're absolutely right. Once you get it in place, it almost becomes self-managed, and then it's just a question of maintaining that awareness and checking on a regular basis that all of the measures, the policies and the procedures and the training are being delivered, right? And that so that you can maintain that level of demonstrable compliance. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're on mute again, Nick.
I've done it again, haven't I? I always ask at about this stage. So, what are the technical solutions? What are the things? Are there technical solutions? What are the things that we can do? And I guess I'm looking to you, Russ, here for a an architect's view of the world. How do we? Before you do, though, I will say it constantly amuses me. I like to get my news from various sources. One of them is the Washington Post, who every time you go to the Washington Post website, it flags up because of the new GDPR regulations in Europe. And I think about the time they updated that, I think is now what 2.5 years old since it became law. But yeah, so technical solutions. Talk to us about what. And obviously our audience is small business, but the ID Solves audience is much larger businesses. So on both levels, what are the technical approaches that people should be thinking about?
I think the approach is largely the same regardless of scale. So it almost comes down to, again, taking it from an individual point of view, raising awareness, making sure that people have an understanding of what information is being collected and processed, what of it could potentially be valuable. And if you've got, if you're into kind of cloud services, you can automate some of this stuff to a degree. I mean, again, the technology is always about enabling and kind of enforcing policies and procedures that the business put in place, but ultimately it can't do everything for you. So if you've got certain cloud services and you want to classify data to try and identify where you might have financial information, healthcare information, national insurance, those kind of things. There are policies and systems you can put in place to tag that stuff. You can do it on premise as well. It's trickier, more expensive is probably the simple thing for small businesses. But it's never going to catch everything. So it'll give you a good kind of head start on things like that. From there, you kind of need to work with your power users and your responsible people within the business. So if you've got a data protection officer, work with them, someone who has some awareness of your contractual obligations to your vendors and your customers. And obviously work with your IT team and obviously the team leaders. Yeah, if you've got people who are processing customer data over the phone or via email and things, they need to know how to process it in the appropriate way. And all of that together will actually help you better serve those kind of access requests that Phil mentioned, and also better safeguard the data. And one of the interesting things I come across quite a lot is people holding on to data they don't need to hold on to. They're contractually not obligated to hold on to it. And it's in holding on to it, I think they actually kind of make their liability worse just because it's that kind of human nature to hoard. I think people are hoarders. The other things. Yeah, the other things are really around the kind of good cybersecurity hygiene. So again, we covered a lot of the stuff. We did our dark web webinar the other week. I think, is that on our website now? It'll be coming soon if it's not. But we've also got some blogs that cover this stuff. So we'll include some links for that. Go and check those out. But good password health, have individual logins for all the different things you use, have MFA or multi-factor authentication. Stop and think. Really, really simple thing. What is this information and what am I doing with it? A kind of a great analogy, I suppose, is your banking information. None of us would publicize a bank account and a sort code because we know that that's valuable information that could be used for fraud. But think about it. If you to ring up a bank with just an account number and a sort code, it wouldn't get you very far. You'd need to have everything else that kind of goes along with it to identify that person, to identify some of the security questions. And it goes back to, again, something we covered a little while ago with the advent of social media and the kind of the oversharing aspects of people. They got those fun quizzes. Work out what your drag queen or your porn star name could be. It's your mother's maiden name. It's the street you were born in or the town you were born in. And all these things that the banks and things will ask you as part of your security validation. But because we're being asked for our name and address quite a lot, we're being asked for these weird bits of information because they're either fun, our guard is down. As Phil mentioned, cyber threat actors are very switched on to the fact that a lot of our triggers, a lot of the ways of getting information from us and about us is psychological. It's not really about the technology per se. So yeah, the kind of stop and think. And then the other bits and pieces are about looking at those DLP kind of policies. So again, depending on the scale of business you've got and whether everything's in-house or in the cloud, or more than likely a mixture of both, the hybrid clouds it's kind of commonly referred to, look at DLP. So it's a DLP is a means of, similar to the data classification, it's identifying patterns of data and sensitive labels inside of content. So it can identify where this content is moving around the business and if it's leaving the business, and you can flag it or you can block it. If you have a hybrid kind of cloud strategy, you need to look at DLP across the board. So you'll probably have something in-house on your perimeter network identifying when contracts are going out with the words sensitive kind of watermarked into them, or they've got account numbers in them, and similarly via email. And if you've got cloud services, same sort of thing applies. You need to have something running inside that cloud service that can identify and tag that data. And also, this sounds like a bit of a simple thing, but make sure your users only have the level of access that they need. Again, simple measures, take a step back and just make sure that your departments and your roles are appropriate to the data they're collecting and the way they're handling and performing their job role. And also cut off extraneous methods. So again, I'll shout out to things like Microsoft's cloud. Right out of the box, it will integrate into things like Google Drive and Dropbox. You can just bolt those things into Teams and other bits and pieces. If your company has no use for that stuff, then don't turn it on, because you're potentially creating an avenue where someone can exfiltrate data, whether it be maliciously or inadvertently. They may not be familiar with the tools they're using and need to share something with a customer quite genuinely and end up taking that data out of the business, putting it into a different platform and sharing it. You don't know how well that's been secured. Just take those things away. Don't leave them there, because they're an accident waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of being blasé about data, I don't know if you remember a few, because you said, well, nobody would give away their bank account and their sort code. Do you remember a few years ago, Jeremy Clarkson in his column, he actually did precisely this and published his sort code and his bank account and said, okay, you know my sort code and my bank account, what are you going to do about it? And found within a few days that he was a fully paid up member of a couple of environmental charities.
That's the thing, though. He's a public figure. Finding his date of birth and everything else wasn't that difficult, is it?
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. So everybody who uses social media will have at some point mentioned, I'm so many years old today, it's my birthday. They'll make some statement like that. They'll celebrate an anniversary or something. They'll mention their partner or their children's names, and it's always little tidbits that go out there that can be collected, and it's not difficult to do.
Yeah, so I mean, I would agree with everything you said there, Russell. And then on the privacy side, it wraps, it's like a protective shell around that. Again, if you imagine an onion skin where all of that great guidance and advice and protection is then translated into a framework that is communicated throughout the company through proper policies and procedures, game plans. How do you manage a subject access request? A subject access request is basically somebody writing to you saying, I'm concerned, or I want, about the way my information is being used. Can you give me some, so how do you manage that? Because if it's not managed correctly, it could escalate into a data breach. And the thing is that, there are data breaches every day, thousands and thousands of data breaches every day, but they're all relatively minor in the greater scheme of things. But the thing is that if you have these policies and procedures in place, it's all about preparation and planning. If you have these policies and procedures in place, you have well-trained staff and resourced staff. You've got a data protection officer there, right, who is an expert on data privacy regulation and has experience, right? Well, then you're prepared for the worst case scenario. And what are your plans for the worst case scenario for the big data breach? How will you manage social media channels? How will you manage traditional media channels? How will you liaise with the IT, with cybersecurity, with law enforcement, with the regulatory authorities? You need to think of all of these things. What guidance can be brought in from the legal team? So you need, we develop what are called playbooks. And a playbook is basically we take the senior executives through scenario training, right? So this has just happened. You've got 30 minutes to respond to this. Respond. Yeah, protect your reputation, protect the organization, protect the rights of the data subject. So, you know, what steps do you go through to contain that and to prevent it from causing further damage if damage has been caused? So, yeah, I absolutely agree with Russell. All of these things, you know, now when you are in a position to prepare for this sort of thing, to plan for this sort of thing, to put the correct frameworks, do it. Don't. It's too late once the breach has occurred, right? It's too late. So for what it would cost now to put it in place, to inform your staff, to get the right measures there, it's common. To me, it's common sense.
It's infinitely more cost effective than the alternative.
Yeah.
You know, it'll always look. I like the. I've seen quite a lot on LinkedIn. The great little infographic of you know, your IT, your security budget before a breach, and the guy's there with a handful of coins, and then your budget after a breach is there with a wad full of bills. It's too late at that point. You know, you are throwing bad money after good. And it's an interesting point that the preparation is almost probably one of the most important bits, because how you respond to an incident can really recover some of that confidence and that reputational impact. You know, companies that bury their heads in the sand or just kind of deny everything straight out of the gate don't always fare very well. So even if, you know, you can do everything right and still have an issue, you can have a malicious actor breach your systems, you know, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to zero. So being able to respond in a clear and concise way and in a timely way and handling it in the right way is definitely key.
And the exposure. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I'm very conscious of time.
Yeah, it's a fast hour. Huh? I've enjoyed that. So
yeah, the phrase that has popped into my mind, which I saw somewhere, planning for the next emergency will begin immediately after it happens. Yes, that was a very quick hour, and it was a interesting and engaging conversation. So thank you very much to both of you. This podcast will be made available on YouTube and on our website, and it will include links to contact us and what have you. Have a look at the Select Technology page on YouTube, so on LinkedIn, and also the ID Solves, and go to idsolves.com or select-technology.co.uk to find out a bit more. Is there anything you want to throw in before we finish off, chaps?
Nope. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. It's been a fast 1 hour, and it's maybe we can do it again in the not too distant future. And yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, on that note, and thank you as well, Phil, for your insight and wisdom, which are greatly appreciated. And I think, yeah, and maybe even if it's not even a webinar, I could see the two of you
we just chat
during the fat for hours, even if we're not recording.
The three amigos.
So thank you very much. We're just coming to the top of the hour, so we'll allow people to get away, because no doubt they've got their next meeting to go to. It's been good fun. Thank you all, and keep an eye on our website for future webinars.